Countries promise to reduce emissions, but who checks if they actually did it or not? Who pays for this transition? And what happens when carbon becomes a trade weapon? This is not environment anymore. This is climate governance. What is climate governance? A system that controls money, trade, and power. And today, we are not studying random topics. We are decoding a system. That is a system that can directly give you questions in Prelims 2026. There are four pillars. One is global Stocktake, and second one is climate finance, that is NCQG, collective quantified, carbon markets, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and trade enforcement, that is CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism. I am Niranjan Ankilla. Let's clean the system. Every 5 years, the world passes and asks one question: are we actually solving climate change? That process is called the global stocktake under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That is GST, Global Stocktake. That is the global report card actually on climate change and global warming. Now understand this clearly. Countries give promises. These are called NDCs. What is NDC? Nationally determined contributions. But here is the problem: these promises are not strictly enforceable. So the world needed a pressurized system, a pressure system, that is global stocktake. What does it do? It does three things. That is, checks emission reduction, checks adaptation, and checks finance and technology support. But now listen carefully. This is where UPSC traps you. Global stocktake does not evaluate India, USA, China, etc. countries individually. Does not evaluate individually. It evaluates collective global progress. It evaluates collective global progress. Global stocktake is collective global progress, not an individual country. Does not evaluate. That means UPSC is not asking what did India do. It is asking, is the world failing? And the first global stocktake result at COP28, that is Conference of Parties 28, said one thing clearly: the world is not on track for 1.5 degrees Celsius reduction of pre industrial levels. UPSC is not testing climate facts. It is testing whether you understand global accountability without enforcement. So now we enter the real battlefield. We are completed global stack take and we are enter into the real battlefield, that is money. Earlier, developed countries promised 1 billion, 100 billion US dollar per year. They will spend. Did they deliver that properly? No, they failed. So now we move to a new system, that is NCQG. What is that? New collective quantified goal. New collective quantified goal. That is what? A post 2025 climate finance target. But this is not just about money. This is about power negotiation. Develop, Developing countries like India are saying we need trillions. We need grants, not loans. We need trillions for what? To change to green system, abandon the fossil fuels, abandon the non-renewable energy, to change the renewable energy, to shift. So that is why we need grants, not loans, because loans always a debit trap. That is why we need grants. Developed countries are saying that we will give loans, we will bring private capital. Actual conflict is here. This is the conflict between the developed and the developing countries. And this is where UPSC will test you. What is the trap here? NCQG is not the 100 billion goal, US 100 billion US dollar goal. It replaces it. Previously, it is 100 billion US dollar goal, and now it replaces it. And remember this line: climate change is not about emissions, it is about who pays. Who pays? Finance equal to power here. Global north is developed countries, global south is more or less a developing countries. That is why they need grants to shift non-renewable to renewable energy. So that is why this situation arises. Now the most misunderstood part is carbon trading. What is carbon trading? Under the Paris Agreement, countries can cooperate for carbon trading, for carbon market. That is the actual meaning is, if one country reduces more emissions, it can transfer that benefit to another country. If one country reduces more emissions, it can transfer that benefit to another country. This is Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Now, very simplify it. Two parts you must remember in the Paris Agreement of Article 6. That is Article 6.2, country to country trading, bilateral or multilateral. Article 6.4 is UN regulated global carbon market. This is 6.2, 6.4. And this is not theory anymore. India is already entering this space, signing carbon cooperation agreements with countries like Singapore and exploring with Japan. This is India entering the carbon economy. This is the India entering the carbon economy. Now, the most dangerous trap here is double counting. If India reduces 1 ton carbon dioxide and sells it to another country, only one country can claim it. If both countries claim, the entire system collapses. So they use something called corresponding adjustment. Corresponding adjustment. But UPSC will not ask that term directly. What is corresponding adjustment? Like that? No, never. It will test the logic here. So carbon is no longer science. It is a tradable asset now. Efficiency through trade. That is why it is tradable asset. Now, most aggressive tool here is CBAM. What is CBAM? Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. This is introduced by European Union. Now understand the logic here is European companies pay carbon tax, but imports from countries like India may not. So what does European Union do? It imposes a carbon cost at the border. Let me explain easily. If India exports steel, cement, aluminium, fertilizers, and electricity, and these items are production is carbon intensive. So EU, European Union will charge extra. This is called preventing carbon leakage at the border. But here is the trap. CBAM, uh, border adjustment mechanism, is not part of UN climate system. It is not under UNFCCC. It is a unilateral European Union trade policy. So trade is now climate enforcement. Trade is now climate enforcement. Now it's time to test yourself. Completed theory. Global Stocktake evaluates individual countries. Is it correct or not? Is it false? It evaluation it evaluates global progress, not individual countries. As far as NCQG is the concern is the post 2025 finance goal. Yes, this is true. CBAM. What is CBAM? CBAM is UN mechanism. False. It is simply an European Union policy, unilateral trade policy. Now, the real UPSC pattern is statement 1 and statement 2 types of questions. Given statement number 1 is global stack take evaluates global progress. This is the statement number 1. And statement number 2, that is because NDCs are legally binding. The answer is statement number 1 is correct. Statement number 2 is wrong. Because NDCs are not legally binding. Those are not legally binding. Those are. So climate change is no longer about glaciers. It is about what? Money, trade, and power. Understand what is global stack take. What is the actual focus objective of the GST, that is called as global Stocktake. Then master NCQG. What is the finance? What is the mechanism? And control Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, that is 6.2 article, that is Article 6.4, bilateral and global level UN. And decode CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism. It is a unilateral EU trade policy. And you don't just study environment, you control prelims 2026. I am Niranjan Ankilla. Decode the system. I will see you in the next master class. Thank you.